And the coronavirus crisis has seen workplaces forced to rapidly adapt as employees set up shop at home. But what will it mean for the future of work once this pandemic is over? Joining me now is David Pich, CEO of the Institute of Managers and Leaders. Welcome, David. How do we prepare? How do teams prepare, companies prepare, once it's over?
Oh, hi, Tim, and thanks so much for having me on. It's great to chat, albeit in really quite unique circumstances. I think at the Institute, and we represent around about 10,000 managers and leaders and organisations, and we talk really about four aspects of leadership that I think it would be worth managers and leaders focusing on. And the first one, for example, would be around communication. And I think the way that managers and leaders communicate with their teams in these incredibly unusual times is seeing a real shift. So one of the things that we say to our members is we advocate for transparency. We're saying don't sugarcoat the message to your team. So that's the very first piece of advice that we give. Don't sugarcoat the message, because your teams want an honest and realistic view on what the organisation is going to look like, what business is going to look like when this crisis passes. So that's the very first thing that we say. And the second thing that we talk about is this idea of checking in on staff, not checking up on your staff. And we've been talking for many years now about the merging of the workplace and home life, and this really is it, isn't it? This is the merging of work and home life writ large. And we say to our members and to managers and leaders, check in with your staff, don't check up on them. And that really is around the language that you use when you contact your staff. So one example I can give is that we have around about 100 staff at the Institute of Managers and Leaders, and I try my best to call 3 members of staff every day to find out what's going on in their life and how they're coping with the new workplace reality that's very likely to be with us for a fair few weeks. So we talk about checking in, not checking up. And that's the language that you use when you talk to your staff members.
It's been a fascinating time, David, of reflection as well, amidst obviously the drama and the tragedy that we've seen in many parts of the world. But one thing that has been focused on is people, human beings, and how important they are.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think what we're seeing, and I think Tim, it's sometimes quite easy to become quite despondent. The news at the moment tends to be terrible. There's a lot of bad news around, but actually, what we're encouraging people to do is focus on some of the highlights of good management and leadership that we see, and we see that locally. We see some fantastic examples of local managers and leaders communicating with their staff really well, even though the message that they're communicating is very, very difficult. If you look at Paul Scurrah, CEO of Virgin, who happens to be one of the fellows of the Institute, he's communicating really difficult messages, but he's doing it in a very open way. I was reading yesterday that Accor hotels, for example, have just announced that they're offering their rooms as shelter for victims of domestic violence. There are some really good examples of management and leadership at a local level. And it really is about focusing on people. So if you take the Institute of Managers and Leaders, for example, we have announced to our staff that we're adopting a lose staff last philosophy. So we're doing absolutely everything we can within the organisation, and we're sharing our initiatives with our staff to make sure that we reduce costs, because of course our revenue has been significantly impacted ourselves. But we're taking a philosophy of lose staff last, and we're working with our staff, and we're asking our staff to contribute to our strategy, which is obviously changing in these times. But you're absolutely right. The focus on people is something that I really hope lives on when this pandemic and this crisis passes.
Look, people of our generation, you'd have to define us as battle-hard bulldogs. We've been around for a long time, probably in that last phase of our working life. But you mentioned before about not sugarcoating, but it's an interesting balance, isn't it? You don't want to sugarcoat, but you also know the vital importance of keeping morale. particularly amongst young people.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. But I think we have to understand that the role of the leader isn't to have all the answers. I think sometimes leaders believe that because they're in a leadership position, they're expected to have all of the answers. But we're living through an unprecedented crisis that, let's face it, none of us have lived through this before. And I think this idea that the leader shows vulnerability, and it's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay not to have all the answers. So one example that I could give, that I would encourage managers and leaders who are watching this morning, I would encourage them to get their teams together. I mean, we obviously use electronic methods of doing that during these times, but I get my team together every week. We call it our all-staff huddle. It happens on a Wednesday. And at the end of that, I always do a Q&A session. And I throw it open, and people can ask any question that they like. And if I don't know the answer, I simply say that I just do not know the answer to that question. And I think that's okay. It's okay not to have all the answers. And I think that kind of honesty and authenticity, if you like, is what people expect, because people know, all of the staff members, all employees know that this is a very, very difficult time. And it's particularly difficult for the managers and leaders out there who are trying to lead both remotely and through a crisis. So I think it's okay to say, I don't have an answer to that question.
Yeah, it's there's a parallel here with parenting, isn't there? Because often we don't have the answers there as well. As a father of three, it's an unprecedented time. We will get through it, David. I appreciate your messaging because it's very, very important. Enjoy your Easter.
Thank you very much, and yourself, Tim. Cheers.